Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very accomplished and senior professional, a philosopher, and a speaker from North Carolina, USA, Dr. Tom Morris. Tom, welcome to the show.
So wonderful to be with you.
Dr. Morris is the chairman and CEO of Morris Institute for Human Values. He's a philosopher, a keynote speaker, and an advisor. He's published over 30 books, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. And these books are like if Aristotle ran General Motors, the Oasis Within, and Plato's Lemonade Stand. And he's delivered over 1,200 presentations nationally and globally. Tom, after such an amazing journey, let me start by asking you, tell me about your amazing journey in brief.
My father had this attitude toward life. He was my first philosophy teacher. He never went to college, but he constantly read philosophy books his whole life. He said to me, life is supposed to be a series of adventures. The one you're on now is preparing you for the next one in ways you can't even imagine.
Correct.
He gave me an example in his life of following your heart, trying to do good in the world. He said to me, anything you're doing, as long as you love it and think you have something to contribute, continue to do it. But if either of those things changes, you should make a change. I love being a philosopher because I get to meet people in every walk of life, in every industry imaginable, and bring them the wisdom of the ancients for the modern challenges they face now. Sometimes very new perspectives they haven't thought of at all. And yet these are ideas that have stood the test of time. So it's just a wonderful adventure for me.
How wonderful. You know, you also call yourself the world's happiest academically trained philosopher. Please help me understand this and give me an example.
Well, so many people in the world of philosophy, they learn to ask questions. They learn to be skeptical. They learn to have doubts about everything, right? Socrates in our culture, Western culture, was a great questioner of everyone's ideas. Well, if you're only asking questions, if you're only having doubts, sometimes that it brings a sort of a gloom with it, right? You're not sure of anything anymore. But as a philosopher, I've learned to fight through the questions and find the answers. And to me, it's a joyous adventure. I love seeing people's eyes light up. I love seeing companies turn around because of a piece of ancient wisdom. It could be from the Gita. It could be from Plato. It could be from Aristotle or the Stoics. But the right piece of wisdom sometimes can make all the difference in a situation. That makes me very happy.
Absolutely. Fantastic. What a great response. So, Tom, let's talk about the Morris Institute for Human Values. It's an independent network for the discovery and promulgation of practical wisdom. What was your motivation to set up the Morris Institute?
Well, I was a professor after degrees at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and at Yale University, where I did 2 PhDs. I went to teach at the University of Notre Dame. And in my specialty, it was the #1 university in the world for the particular kind of philosophy I was doing at the time. And then businesses started asking me, is there any ancient wisdom about success? How about partnership? How about change? How about building great cultures? And so I did research on those topics and brought the results to people. I was giving talks everywhere in the world in no time at all. I was on 400 to 500 airplanes a year. And my wife said, you know what, you're living 2 lives. You're teaching at a university, writing academic books, but you're also going around the world. You may have to make a choice at some point. I thought there's so many great professors in the classrooms, but there are no public philosophers in America anymore, like Ralph Waldo Emerson 150 years ago. No philosophers who go to where people are. If you want to see a philosopher, you have to go to Harvard or you have to go to Yale or Princeton in this country. You know, they're not going to come to where you are. Well, I thought I'm going to do that. So I left as a full professor. I just resigned my job. And the business school at Notre Dame said, well, if you want to set up a new institute, we'll help you do that. Wow. Before you know it, I had philosophers around the world helping me bring wisdom to every kind of industry, every kind of company, audiences of sometimes 10,000 people in a room, wonderful experiences. And so we've kept that going over the years and now have a publishing arm called Wisdom Work, where we're publishing books that to get to more people than the university presses can get to. And yet we're more concerned about real wisdom than the big New York presses are. So it's just been a wonderful evolution of bringing wisdom to people.
Fascinating. When you spoke a little bit about ancient wisdom, there is a lot of ancient wisdom that exists in the ancient cultures, whether it's China or India, Greek, Rome. How are you, drawing a lot of knowledge from a lot of these cultures?
Yes, I am. In fact, I just finished a book recently. It won't be my next book, but it will be the book after that. It took me 30 years to do, and I draw 7 chapters from the Tao Te Ching, 7 chapters from the Analects of Confucius. I go through a medieval Islamic theologian and his philosophical ideas. I use the ideas of a Jesuit, a Spanish Jesuit. I go to Ralph Waldo Emerson, the quintessential American philosopher, and I draw wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita. So I use the wisdom of all these diverse cultures, because people think, oh, the philosophies are so different. Well, deep down, they have so many issues in common and perspectives in common, because human nature is what it is across all cultures and through the centuries. So I'm able to draw and show people how the great minds agree on so many amazingly deep things that are relevant to modern life now.
How interesting. You and I need to have a separate chat, because my new book is Management Lessons from Hindu Scriptures. But that, I think great. You and I are going to have a separate conversation on that. Today is all about you. But when you talk of practical wisdom, Tom, what does it mean? And can you give me an example for my viewers and listeners?
Sure. One of the early topics I was asked to talk on was success. An automobile dealer said that he had a meeting every year for all the northern Midwestern dealers of their brand in America. He said, we always have motivational speakers. They always say the same thing: set goals, believe in yourself, you can do it. He said, did the philosophers say anything deeper about that? I said, let me look into it. I read hundreds of articles, dozens of books, scores of books. I finally realized that across philosophy, East and West, there were 7 universal conditions for success. So I isolated these ideas. In any challenging situation, we need a clear conception of what we want to see happen. We need a goal clearly imagined, a vivid vision. We need a strong confidence we can attain the goal, a focus, concentration on what it will take to realize the goal, a stubborn consistency in pursuing that vision, an emotional commitment to the importance of what we're doing, a good character to guide us and keep us on proper course, and a capacity to enjoy the process along the way. So I isolated these 7 things, and then I created a talk around who the philosophers were who discovered these things and how these things work together. I began giving that talk, and I must have given that particular talk, called True Success, probably 1,000 times, nearly 1,000 at least. People have said it changed their lives, it changed their businesses, that they would review these 7 steps every week to see what they had been doing in connection with those 7 things and what they needed to do differently in the coming week. To see the philosophical wisdom of the ages play out in such a practical way, because those 7 things, most successful people intuitively, instinctively do them, but to raise it to a conscious level of awareness, you can get better as a skilled behavior, at confidence building, at consistency, at each of those things. So the practicality, people have told me they owe their entire careers to hearing me when they were young speak on those 7 things. And they're on my website, tomvmorris.com. I call these ideas the 7 C's of success. You can click on a little page and review those. I try to do that for every topic I tackle. I try to find a simple framework of ideas that can be easily memorized and then can be used on a daily basis as a practice to raise the level of everything you do.
Fascinating. And what goes into discovering and promulgating practical wisdom?
Reading more books than probably most people in their lifetime. Any new topic I tackle, I read everything I can find. And if someone asks me to speak on a topic, I don't typically say, well, I'm not a specialist on that. I'm sorry, you've called the wrong person. Last year, somebody asked me to give a closing talk for a global conference on the idea of hope. The hope we have in the future. And rather than say, well, I've never studied that, I said, sure, I'll look into it. I'll come up with something. I read everything I could. I came up with a very tight presentation, and people afterwards were saying that was the most important part of the entire conference. It was only a very short talk, but I dove into it. I may read an 800-page book to find one great sentence with an idea that can be life-changing. And most people don't have time for that. You know, so I explore. Here's my image, Ostrich. I see myself as panning for gold in a mountain stream all day. And most of the day, my pan is full of mud. But every now and then, there's a tiny little gold nugget. I pull it out, polish it up, and put it in a talk or in a book so that others don't have to stand in that cold stream all day long.
Well said. Well said. Absolutely fascinating. My next question to you is that you also say that you work with human values.
Yes.
First, help me understand, how do you define human values, and what are some of the key human values you work with?
Well, so many of the business schools in the world that do a great job in preparing people for the world of work, they concentrate on ideas, on tools and techniques. You know, this is how we keep a balance sheet. This is how we stay profitable. This is how you market a product. I see a value as different from a belief or from an idea. It's a commitment. It's something that your behavior attaches to as a guiding star. I want people to help people understand those values, like honesty. Think how different the headlines would be about businesses around the world if everyone were honest in their dealings with others. We see things exploding all the time here in the U.S. in cryptocurrency now. Last week, the headlines were about Elizabeth Holmes serving a prison sentence, and now it's Sam Bankman-Fried as we speak. Think about honesty. Think about respect for other people. Think about, and you could name, 20 values that would keep us on the path of productivity and great good for the world. We would avoid all these terrible headlines. People wouldn't end up in prison. They would understand business as a genuinely human endeavor meant to create greater good for the world, not just to line the pockets of those doing the work or having the ideas. So I think values, the commitments we have, are at the core of doing good in the world. Well
said. And when I used to when I used to own Guardian Pharmacy, there was about 1,200 people. Every person I would say give the same three things. I said, every parent tells their child, don't steal, don't lie, fear God. There you go. And exactly the same values that you're telling me. But absolutely. I want to now move to your book, your books. So let me start with your first book, which is Plato's Lemonade Stand, Stirring Change into Something Great, which is your latest book.
Oh, yeah.
And you also talk about the old adage, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. How do you go about achieving this?
It's interesting because in the world of business for 20 years now, we've been talking about resilience. When something bad happens, something difficult happens, bounce back, right? Get back on track. And then for the last 10 years, because of the work of some psychologists in the US and other places, we've been talking about grit or perseverance. When something bad happens, soldier on, persevere, continue to work hard. Well, I grew up hearing the old saying, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. And that's a very vivid image, right? A bitter, sour lemon can be turned into something delightful. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, that's different from resilience. It's not just about bouncing back. It's different from grit. It's not just about soldiering on. It's about turning difficulty into delight. It's about being transformative with a challenging situation so that something wonderful can result from it. And I want to look into that. How do you do that? Because I heard people say it when I was growing up 100 times, but nobody ever said how. They just hoped the image itself would inspire me. It turns out that so many great philosophers had such amazing advice about how to be a lemonade maker in the world, how to be an alchemist, how to be transformative.
Correct.
I think that's the next big wave of understanding in business, is to think of ourselves as being transformative agents in the world. And so I wrote the book, and people have told me that, especially during the pandemic, it's changed their attitudes, it's changed their lives. So many executive teams, before they had budgets for a speaker, this is in March of 2020, they would call me up and say, please, we have no budget for a speaker, but we desperately need you because we heard about your new book, Plato's Lemonade Stand. We're having lemons dumped on us now. We don't know what's going to happen next. Could you please give us a short talk for our executive team? And I would always say yes, because my view of being a philosopher is I'm here to do good in the world. So if I could help people deal with these challenges in a positive way, what amazing things could result.
Correct. Well said. And when you talk about the book, Plato's Lemonade Stand, there are a lot of things that you're saying that people are able to get practical examples. But when you started to write the book, what was your hypothesis?
I had seen my father have a positive attitude about difficult situations. I knew that attitude had to be an important part of it. And so that gave me a clue that maybe the magic happens inside us before it happens outside us. So I began to, as I read, I began to see that there is an art of self-control. The philosophers have said, whenever anything that seems bad happens, don't rush to judgment. Don't be too quick to say, oh, this is terrible, this is the worst thing ever, because things are hardly ever the same as they first appear to be. So don't rush to judgment, stand back, take it all in. Don't be too quick to get depressed, to get discouraged. Secondly, value the right things. If you only value comfort and security, any change is going to shake you up. But if you value growth and learning, you'll say, oh, well, this is interesting. What am I supposed to learn from this situation? How can I partner up with this problem to make something good happen? So the art of self-control, I think it is the first part of the art of lemonade making, the art of change. It's to don't rush to judgment, value the right things, and use your imagination well. I saw this in my father's life. Whenever something unexpected happens, people's imaginations go out of control. They imagine all kinds of terrible results. If you can learn to use your imagination well, positively, productively, you can turn all that around. So I started with ideas like this about how we respond inwardly. So the art of self-control, there's an art of positive action, there's an art of achievement. I build on these arts or skilled behaviors through the book so that people can actually do these things on a daily basis. And it changes everybody's attitude, everybody's morale, everybody's productivity.
Amazing. So I'm going to certainly go onto Amazon and check out your book and order a copy. And I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners, go and check out Dr. Tom Morris's book, Plato's Lemonade Stand. So Tom, now let's come to one more book, and I have time for one more book that I'd love to talk about, which is If Aristotle Ran General Motors. And I want to understand, before you come to the book, you use Plato in one book, Aristotle in another book. Are all your books named with philosophers?
They're not all named with philosophers, but a number are. For example, someone asked me to write a book about Steve Jobs years ago. One of his direct reports I had great conversations with, and I ended up writing a book called Socrates in Silicon Valley. Steve Jobs and Socrates had fans and enemies, right? They both loved to go barefoot. They both hated taking baths. They both had changed their industry, basically. Philosophy in one, had tech in the other. So I've had books like If Harry Potter Ran General Electric, but I've had other books like The Stoic Art of Living and True Success and The Art of Achievement. But whenever I can find a great philosopher who fits perfectly, I love to honor that thinker.
Fantastic. And that's the philosopher in you. So let's talk about If Aristotle Ran General Motors.
Good. Well, when I'd done a book called True Success, those 7 conditions of success I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago, I realized, there's another side of success. There's not just goal setting. That's what everybody talks about, how to set and achieve your goals. But there's another side, it's relationship building, because no great success is ever is ever had alone. It always arises from a network of people helping each other. So I decided to look into what makes for great relationships, not just friendships, but in a corporate culture, what makes for great working relationships. And I came to realize from the time we get up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, we experience the world along 4 dimensions. The intellectual dimension, we need truth. The aesthetic dimension, we need beauty. The moral dimension, we need goodness. And a spiritual dimension, number 4, we need connectedness or unity amongst ourselves. Well, the truth, beauty, and goodness help attain that unity. I learned that when people in the world of business respect and nurture truth, beauty, goodness, and unity, great things happen. When they ignore those amazing ideals, bad things happen. So I wrote the book based around truth, beauty, goodness, and unity, about how we bring together people, how leaders should understand the big ideas behind any great thing that ever happens. And people have told me, more CEOs have told me that was one of their favorite books. I'll go into the office of a CEO who has 250,000 employees, and he'll say, I got your book, If Aristotle Ran General Motors, on the shelf right here. Let me show you. Sign this book for me. It's a wonderful thing how people have responded to that book.
Fascinating. And then when I've always seen that if, as an author, someone suddenly presents your book to you and say, please sign it, that's an amazing moment. So,
it is an amazing moment.
So Tom, I've got time for 2 more questions.
Yes.
You have worked with senior corporate leaders who have a very different outlook to life. This is the age of the millennials and the Gen Z leaders who are now coming into positions of authority and leadership in large companies. From your perspective as a philosopher, someone who's done so much work on wisdom, how do you see the difference between leaders of the boomers generation and leaders coming from the millennial generation?
That's a very good question. Leaders in my generation, the boomer generation, they wanted to have great business results. The younger leaders now want to have great human results.
Correct.
They seem to have higher ideals guiding them every day at work. Now, a lot of the corporate leaders my age, when they weren't in the office, they were doing great things with charities, with their families, in their communities, creating local voluntary organizations to help raise people up in their lives. But now the younger leaders are doing that at work too. And I love to see this universality, this uniformity of values, not just in their private lives, but in their professional lives, guiding each step of the way, so that business is not something just set apart, a different sort of activity, but it's one with the rest of life. I think that allows the genuinely human values to percolate through everything they do.
Thank you. What a great response. And my last question to you, Tom, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. You mentioned about your incredible learnings from your father. You've spoken about your amazing journey as a philosopher, all your books. What would you say are 3 lessons or 3 learnings you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from our conversation?
Oh, yeah. Number 1, get advice from other people. Learn from others. Soak in the wisdom of those who are a little farther down the road than you are. We don't have to make up everything ourselves, right? So network with sages, hang out with wise people, and soak it all up. And number 2, I'll bring people back to that idea of adventure. Live your life as a series of adventures. Never be afraid to do something new. Never let the success of the past define you forever, but position you for the next success you would have. And number 3, try to bring love into everything you do. It's not just something for your spiritual life and your personal life. It's something for your professional life as well. If you really embrace other people, honor them, treat them with dignity and respect, with genuine love for their good as well as your own, everyone will benefit and everything will benefit.
Wonderful. And on that note, and your 3 wonderful lessons, get advice from others, soak in the wisdom, live your life as a series of adventures. Don't worry about it, any kind of failure. Do something new. And the third one is bring love into everything that you're doing. Thank you, Tom, for speaking to me about your amazing journey, about the Morris Institute, talking to me about human values, talking to me about wisdom, talking to me about your books, Plato's Lemonade Stand, and If Aristotle Ran General Motors. Thank you once again for speaking to me, and good luck.
It's an honor for me. I admire so much the great work you've done throughout your career and you continue to do now. You're an example of a true sage, a very wise person doing great good in the world. It's an honor for me to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.